Hello, and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you all for being with us. Tonight, I'm going to do a special edition of the Informer Report, followed by some commentary. The report will focus on pending state legislation that will be in committee this week. Just a reminder that our goal for the month of February is to hit 1,000 subscriber mark, and we are currently at 900 plus. So if you haven't already, please subscribe and share us with your friends. Doesn't cost anything to subscribe. If you missed our show earlier today at 2 p.m., we had Walter D. Kennedy, an author and the current Commander-in-Chief of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. We discussed Lincoln in detail. We did have some technical issues, and that show was recorded. It's being downloaded. It should be available in a couple of hours. So check it out and share it. I think you'll enjoy it. Certainly, you'll hear some things there that not likely to hear other places. Now, before we get started, a word from our sponsor, LifeWave, a unique product that uses light reflection to activate the body's own natural energy, supporting healing, improving performance, and combating aging without drugs or stimulants. Check it out, and we'll be right back with the Informer Report.
Light, the energy of life itself. Since the beginning of time, light has sustained us, fueled our growth, and shaped the world. Even Einstein recognized that everything we are is made of light. But what if we could harness the light within us, not just to live, but to renew, restore, and rejuvenate? Introducing LifeWave X39, the first product in the world that activates stem cells using our body's own light. Backed by clinical research, multiple patents, and over 10 years of stem cell research, a revolutionary wearable light technology that unlocks the power of activating our own stem cells with a single, safe, affordable, non-transdermal patch that puts you back in control of how you look, feel, and perform. Unlike drugs or chemicals, X39 works naturally, awakening your body's ability to heal and thrive. It's time to unlock your full potential, restore your vitality, and embrace a healthier, more vibrant you.
There's a lot of legislation to talk about, and I'll try to hit some of the important ones that are scheduled for committee this week and maybe talk some about things that will be coming up. If you don't already know, anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 bills are heard every session. Now, some of them just get filed and don't get a lot more action than that. Nobody can keep up with all of them, but we'll cover several of the bills tonight. The first is an eminent domain bill. This is House Bill 2037 by Bud Halsey, if I recall correctly, scheduled for the Civil Justice Subcommittee. Now, I got this from David Seal from Jefferson County. He's been involved in this issue for years and has been on the show a time or two. He sent me an email wanting me to alert you to this issue. There's an article in the Tennessee Conservative about it, and it's posted. The link is active. It includes the committee members' names, the numbers, and emails to contact. And if nothing else, you can go to Tennessee Conservative News and look up critical vote on Tennessee property rights scheduled for Civil Justice Subcommittee. That if you can't pull it up from us, you should be able to get it from them. Anyway, in summary, the bill by Representative Halsey and Senator Bowling aims to close a loophole that will place property owners on a more even playing field with airport authorities that hold the power to use eminent domain on property owners. If enacted, the Tennessee Just Compensation for Property Owners Act would address a laundry list of financial damages that property owners suffer from a forced taking. Bear with me here. The bill would not prevent takings by airports. Instead, it would make the property owner financially whole if a forced taking occurred. Thousands of Tennesseans are in the line for having their homes taken for being in proximity to an airport. As it stands right now, airport authorities and other condemners hold the ultimate power over property owners to take their property. Many condemners claim that eminent domain takings are rare. That's because the power of eminent domain gives condemners a one-sided power structure to persuade property owners to agree to a so-called voluntary sales transaction. The bill is on notice for hearing in the House Civil Justice Subcommittee for Wednesday, February 18th. So if you could go to the Tennessee Gov site, or you can go to that article on Tennessee Conservative News and look up this issue, and it'll list all of the people that are on the House Civil Justice Subcommittee, and that's who you need to call and or email or both. And hey, if you can be there in person, that would be great too. I know that's hard for a lot of us. Parking is a nightmare down there. If you've never been, or if you haven't been in a while, it didn't get any better. I guarantee you that. Also on the criminal justice sub for the 18th is House Bill 2064 by Representative Todd. Now, this bill repeals the criminal offenses of unlawfully carrying a firearm or club with the intent to go armed and carrying or possessing a weapon in or on public parks, playgrounds, civic centers, and other public recreational buildings and grounds. It allows persons convicted of stalking or a misdemeanor domestic violence offense to possess a firearm after 5 years from the date of conviction. So you don't necessarily have to lose your right to protect yourself, the right to protect your life and the life of your family for some earlier mistake that you made. Now, John Harris of the TFA has stated some concerns about one aspect of this legislation that will have some effect on minors in reference to hunting with shotguns and rifles. But all in all, this bill is certainly an improvement. The Senate sponsor is Paul Bailey, and that's Senate Bill 2467. Expect it to get to the subcommittee in the House before you see any movement in the Senate. For those of you who are new to how things work, a lot of times that's the way they will do it, because the House has subcommittees and committees to go through. And some of the subcommittees and committees are huge. And in the Senate, they just have a committee. They don't have subcommittees. The Senate's a lot smaller. It works its way through a whole lot quicker. So a lot of times you won't see any action on the Senate side until it's gotten at least through the subcommittee on the House side. And some of them not only have to go through a subcommittee and a committee, but sometimes multiple committees to ever make it to the floor. So just keep that in mind. You can expect to see things move in the House a lot of times quicker than the Senate. Representative Fritz and Senator Hensley have a very similar bill filed, but it's not on the schedule yet. House Bill 1473 by Bolso, and this is Senate Bill 1746, I believe by either Pody or Bowling. All right, it's already gone through committee. It's on the House regular calendar, likely to pass. If you make it to the House calendar, that's a pretty good sign. Normally, because they're going to kill anything they're going to kill, they normally kill in the committee or subcommittee. That's the way they do it. So normally, if you make it, you're going to make it through the floor. Now, you still got the Senate to deal with. So to make it all the way through House, if it doesn't get through the Senate, it's not going to fly. But I want to talk about this one for just a little bit. All right, so this past Tuesday, and some of this information that I'm going to share with you, give credit. It's I didn't write all of it. Some of this is from Tennessee Stands. They do a great job, so I'll give them credit and get the information out to you. This past Tuesday, the Children and Family Affairs Subcommittee heard House Bills 1473, Senate Bill 1746, sponsored by Representative Gino Bolso and by Senator Bowling. This would clarify that private citizens and organizations are not bound by the 14th Amendment or the Supreme Court's purported interpretation of the 14th Amendment in the Obergefell versus Hodges case. That's the gay marriage case that happened in 2015. This bill states that private citizens and organizations are not bound by the 14th Amendment or by the Supreme Court's purported interpretation of the 14th Amendment in the Obergefell versus Hodges case, and no private citizen or organization in this state is required to recognize a marriage or a purported marriage between individuals of the same sex, notwithstanding any other law. A lot of laws don't necessarily apply to private individuals in certain cases. They would only apply to governments at some level, county or state government. They also amended it that, notwithstanding any other law, that no board shall discipline, sanction, threaten, or threaten to discipline or sanction any person for declining to celebrate or officiate at a marriage or commitment ceremony that falls outside of the definition of marriage provided in the code. By the way, in 2015, when our state caved on this whole deal, and I want to talk about that a little more here in a second, we had a constitutional amendment, an amendment to the Tennessee Constitution that said, look, no matter what, we're only going to recognize marriage between a man and a woman. I mean, that's what our Constitution said. All right, so I want to start the commentary now a little bit. So it's good that we protect private individuals or organizations, and I'm not sure they could have been prosecuted anyway, but yes, anybody can sue. And of course, there would be nothing to stop it without a law that somebody from being sanctioned. Oh, well, you refused, and so therefore we're going to sanction you. But, let's not forget, this case was just more federal overreach by the judiciary. And that's all it was. It was really more court-created perversion, Supreme Court created perversion of the Equal Protection Clause and the Due Process Clause of the 14th. Now, the Equal Protection Clause and the Due Process Clause of the 14th, that's a Civil War amendment written in 1868. The language is almost word for word the Civil Rights Bill of 1866, which was designed to make sure that the newly freed slaves in the South had the same rights as the whites. That was the intent of it. And so that they had a right to be a witness in a court. They had a right to sue. They had a right to own property, to sell property. Really, it has much more to do with things that you would find in Article 4 of the U.S. Constitution than the Bill of Rights. Okay, and I understand the Due Process Clause and Equal Protection Clause reference to the 14th and not the Bill of Rights, but oftentimes our courts have perverted that, and a lot of people think that means that, okay, and really they've stretched it to mean this through their doctrine of incorporation, which is another court-created doctrine. It's another court-created doctrine. For the first 60 years after the 14th Amendment, it was recognized even by the courts as, hey, look, this just applies to the issue of, blacks and whites having the same law. Equal protection meant you couldn't have a law that was stricter for a black than a white. Okay. You couldn't have a higher penalty for a black versus a white. You couldn't, and when it comes to due process, it didn't set a standard. The 14th Amendment did not create a standard of, okay, here is the federal definition of due process. All it meant was whatever state, pick a state, their due process system had to be the same for everybody. So you couldn't have this, you could not ignore due process. Well, this guy's black, so we're not going to give him due process. You couldn't do that, or you couldn't have different additional steps or whatever. Your due process and your equal protection had to be the same for both blacks and whites. That's what it was all about. And the court saw it that way for almost 60 years. It was 1925 before they applied something from the First Amendment, and they used the 14th Amendment to justify it under, I want to say, the Equal Protection Clause. But in doing, that was court-created doctrine. And the whole idea of incorporating the Bill of Rights, remember, the Bill of Rights were limits on the federal government, not on the state government. So really, when they first did this, when they first passed the 14th, the newly freed slaves now had the same Bill of Rights that the whites did. Well, guess what? The Bill of Rights, though, were just restrictions on the federal government. They were not restrictions on the state government. One of the first cases after the 14th was passed, the Slaughterhouse case, they made that clear. That, hey, no, the 14th Amendment did not put the federal government in charge of now applying the Bill of Rights to the states. That was a much later perversion. Now, I understand that the Obergefell case had mostly to do with the due process and equal protection. But I just wanted to cover this a little bit so you can see how far away we've gotten from this. We took what was supposed to be just protection for newly freed slaves so that they would have the same due process as whites, the same equal protection as whites, and they turned it into a tool for the federal government to try to say, okay, we set the standard. If we don't agree with your standard, we change it through the courts. Well, courts are not supposed to make laws. But we've been allowing them to do that. We have been de facto allowing them to do that for decades now. All right, so in 2015, our state caved, despite having an amendment to our state constitution that declared what marriage was, a union between a man and a woman. Our cowardly lawmakers, and many of them are still up there. You got a lot of the same people. Cowardly lawmakers, our perverted governor, Bill Haslam was our governor. And within an hour and a half, he already gave the AG at the time, I think his name was Slattery, hey, look, contact all the county clerks, send something out, tell them to comply. Now, I understand Tennessee was not the only state to do it. Every state did it. But think about it. We allowed them to tell us what marriage is. We allowed them to override our state laws on a subject that there's no federal basis for marriage law. That's always been a state issue, but we rolled over. All right. Our state should do, this bill, okay, I guess it's got its good points, no doubt. But the truth is, our state should just tell the feds that not only will private individuals be protected, but that our state will from now on ignore the Supreme Court opinion on this issue. And only marriage between a man and a woman will be allowed or recognized in Tennessee. That's my opinion of what we need to do. I'm not holding my breath, but I think that's what we need to do. House Bill 2166 by Representative Barrett. Hospitals and healthcare facilities. It requires a blood bank to comply with a physician's order for blood donation or directed blood donation for a specific patient. It requires a hospital to allow a patient who is scheduled for a medical procedure to provide, and I'm going to mess this word up, autologous blood donation or directed blood donation upon order of a physician. So basically, you could store your own blood. Or I'm assuming you also maybe allow somebody from your family to store it with a compatible blood type to be stored for you. That's in the health subcommittee for the 18th. The House Health Subcommittee for the 18th. All right. Also, Jody Barrett has House Bill 1805. It'll be in the Education Committee on the 17th. This bill will require schools to teach students about the history and the atrocities committed by the communists. Our kids don't get this anymore. I remember when I was in school in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, and I understand that was a long time ago, they still taught us about why communism was bad and why our Constitution and our form of government was better, and why, you have rights under our system, you have no rights under. We don't teach that anymore. That's why we got all these stupid kids being led to support socialism and communism. So this would require it, if it gets through, to at least teach it. Now, I don't have a lot of confidence in our education system. I don't know how well they'll do with that. So parents out there, you're going to need to reinforce that, no doubt. House Bill 1792 by Monty Fritz. And this is basically, it exempts from the state's sales and use tax the retail sale of food and food ingredients that are voucher eligible under the Special Supplemental Food Program for Women, Infants, and Children, also known as WIC. Basically reducing the sales tax on those certain items. And this will be in the Finance, Ways, and Means Subcommittee the 18th. That is Wednesday. Also, House Bill 2025 by Fritz, Education. Introduced, this bill requires the governing board for each public institution of higher education to install and maintain a Charlie Kirk Memorial Courtyard for civil debate at the main campus of each public institution of higher education governed by the board. And that is placed on the calendar for the Higher Education Subcommittee on the 18th. I think our colleges, they do need to learn how to debate. Obviously the leftists don't know how to debate. They just know how to riot or kill people, or cancel people. But I would have thought, you would think in college or universities that's one of the things that they would teach. Hey, learn how to make your point, learn how to back up your position. And you got to listen to the other guys, if nothing else, so you understand better how to undermine their position, how to publicly call out weak arguments in their position. House Bill 1802 by Kip Capley. And I'm going to read a little more of this because this bill is, I'm glad to see this is out there. You know, a lot of people think we're in Tennessee and that you can, I imagine people would be shocked to know that if you hear somebody breaking into your vehicle and you go out there and confront them, let's say you bring a gun. Well, you can't shoot them for stealing your vehicle. You can't shoot them for stealing your animals or killing your animals. There's a lot. The only thing right now that you can do is you can use deadly force if you feel your life is threatened or if you feel somebody in your family's life is threatened. But you really can't do much about protecting your property, to include your animals. And that's a problem. Obviously, if you're probably in a rural area, you may have a little more leeway. But if you're in some of these urban areas, that's a real problem, because if you do take some action, they're not necessarily going to, you're not necessarily going to just, you're surely not going to escape. Okay. And you should be able to protect your property. And I want to read this because I don't want to give you the wrong impression. All right, so this is House Bill 1802 by Capley. Except as provided in subdivision C2, a person is justified in using deadly force against another if the person would be justified in using force against another. And it makes references to subsections, and not all of these are visible, and that's, you're not going to be able to read along that quick. But when and to the degree the person reasonably believes deadly force is immediately necessary to prevent or terminate the other's actual or attempted trespass, arson, damage to property, including damage to livestock, burglary, theft, robbery, or aggravated cruelty to animals, and the person reasonably believes the property cannot be protected or the other actions terminated by any other means, or the use of force other than deadly force to protect or terminate the other's actions would expose the person or a third person to a risk of death or serious bodily injury. A person is not justified in using deadly force against another individual under this section if the individual is facing away from the person. Okay, so you confront somebody for stealing your property or maybe trying to kill one of your animals, whatever. You confront them and they take off and run. No, you can't shoot them. Okay. I mean, they have to be facing you at the time. Now, if this law passes, it would be it would come in effect immediately. Most laws in Tennessee, there's three ways they can become. The effective clauses there's three different types. Some immediately, some generally in July of that year, usually after July 2nd or July 1st, and then some the following January. But this one will become effective immediately if it passes. And this is on the Criminal Justice Subcommittee for Wednesday. A lot of things on the Criminal Justice Subcommittee this week. So I'm glad to see that bill. And, you know, this is not just about looking for an excuse to shoot somebody, but you should be able to protect your property. And you shouldn't have to worry about, okay, now you're being charged for homicide when you were just protecting your property. Okay, House Bill 2392 by Michelle Renaud. This is the Tennessee Data Center Impact Review Act. Data center means a privately owned and operated physical facility housing computer servers, storage, and networking equipment to store, process, and distribute data and applications, and that has a power capacity of more than 20 megawatts. All right. And starting in January, a person shall not operate a data center in this state without first being issued a permit by the board pursuant to the review of such person's application under this section. Now, there's a lot more to this bill than I'm going to read. It was too long. I'm going to try to hit the high points on it. One of the things that they have to make known as the source of water to be used by the data center, including but not limited to the name of the body of water or groundwater source, the projected daily peak and annual water usage by the data center, the impact of such water uses on the effective residential, agricultural, emergency, and public water supplies, any drought response plan and other contingency planning to be implemented by the data center, the cumulative impacts on local and regional water systems to be caused by the operation of the data center. All conservation, reuse, recycling, or closed loop system measures to be implemented by the data center, proof that the data center will not materially impair, degrade, deplete, contaminate, or adversely affect the availability, quality, reliability, pressure, or reasonable and beneficial use of water for residential or public purposes. Any additional information required by the board to rules. So bottom line, we're trying, you're hearing about these data centers, and not only do they use a lot of electricity, they use a lot of water. So this is trying to put some protection for the local residents and the local communities, rather than somebody just being able to put in a data center, and next thing you know, we've got not only energy problems, but water problems. And this is on the Agriculture and Natural Resources Subcommittee, House Agriculture and Natural Resources Subcommittee, for Wednesday, the 18th. Also by Michelle Renault, House Bill 2393. Prohibits LEAs in public charter schools that serve students in any of the grades kindergarten through fifth from allowing students to access digital services at school, and also from allowing employees to use a digital device to provide instruction, and from administering assessments to students in an electronic format except in certain circumstances. And this is on the Education Administration Subcommittee for the 17th, which is tomorrow. Yeah, we don't need to start our kids with the digital stuff too soon. Many of them already have been on it way too soon. House Bill 1710 by Powers, and this has to do with immigration, as introduced, adds local governments to the entities that must verify that each applicant for public benefits is a United States citizen or lawfully present. You got to be careful with lawfully present, okay? And there's too much to get into. But lawfully present is a pretty wide category. I mean, it really does cover a lot. So I hope Mr. Powers has done his homework on the legal definition of lawfully present. So this bill may not be as strong as he thinks it is. All right. Authorizes the Attorney General reporter to investigate violations of requirements for verification of citizenship. What a concept. Or presence for public benefits, requires certain reporting related to such verification for benefits. And this is on the departments and agency subcommittees for tomorrow. You got to really look at this one. Like I said, there's lawfully present's a pretty wide category. And then don't forget, especially when it comes to public benefits, and that this one's concerning. It might be a good thing. I mean, obviously parts of it are good, that they have to verify certain things, but that lawfully present category is pretty wide open for some things I've read. So I may get back with you on that. All right. House Bill 1711 by Lane Davis. Immigration requires reporting by law enforcement agencies and local government entities and officials regarding persons not lawfully present in the U.S., which is something we should have been doing forever. Requires the Department of Finance Administration to report the annual cost incurred by this state for public schools, including public higher education institutions, prisons, hospitals, social services, agencies that provide benefits and services to persons not lawfully present in the United States. It's on the Department and Agency Subcommittee for tomorrow. That's another one that needs to be looked at. I mean, those are things we need to be doing. We need to be reporting to law enforcement. I'm hoping that, especially if the midterms don't turn out the right way, and I'm concerned they're not going to turn out good for us overall. I don't have a lot of confidence that our state is going to stay hardcore when it comes to, and well, they've really never been hardcore, especially if you look at the record in the past. But let's just hope that we can force them to be a little more hardcore about trying to keep illegals out of here. That's a hard job with the Chamber of Commerce crowd wanting all the cheap labor they can get. Senate Bill 1827 by Taylor. This makes precious metal coins legal tender. That's important, guys. We need precious metal, gold and silver coins to be legal tender. This is on the Senate Commerce and Labor Committee calendar for tomorrow. Okay. So guys, that is not the end all be all of all the bills. And I'm sure I probably missed something that, will be in the committee this week that I should have brought up. Once again, I'll remind you of some sources. Has to do with sovereignty or nullification, go look at tncs.weebly.com. If it has to do with your gun rights, Tennessee Firearms Association. They're the best at that. Election integrity, which I did check, there's no election integrity bills in the committee this week that I saw. And if I messed that up, I'm sure Andrea will let me know about that. Andrea Gomez with TennesseeFairElections.org. So you can keep them opened up, check them out. They'll let you know what's coming up. And then, of course, for just a wider category of bills that are important, look at Tennessee Stands and look at Tennessee Eagle Forum. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the Epstein files because it's been in the news. If you've read much of them at all, I don't think I've read anything sicker than what I've read in the Epstein files. I don't think I've read anything sicker, more evil, more disgusting. And something's got to be done. So now let me just say this up front. I don't think that President Trump has been involved with any of the evil that we've seen in those files. But he seems to have indicated in the past, and yes, we know he's had a relationship with Epstein, maybe more of one than he let on like, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he's been involved with no evil. However, he's also made a comment about, he wanted to protect people that would be in the files, that were his friends, that didn't do anything wrong, but, they will be exposed. They'll be out there. They'll be on that list. There was like a list of 300 or 350 people today. I mean, it even had Elvis on there. Now, Elvis been dead well before the age of emails. So I don't know I don't know why he was on there. I don't know what relationship he had to Epstein. But we've got to figure out what's what on this. And the fact that he campaigned on getting to the bottom of it. And then there was, of course, people not campaigning, but claiming that they wanted to get to the bottom of it too, if they were ever given a chance, like Patel and Bongino. Well, Trump has called it a hoax. So you say you're going to get to the bottom of it during the campaign. Now it's a hoax. Now Patel and Bongino say, hey, there was nothing there. Bondi said that prosecuting people on the list would bring down the system. Well, wait a minute. It can't be both things at the same time. It can't be a hoax and something that would bring down the whole system if we prosecute everybody on the list. In any event, this level of evil has to be dealt with, not swept under the rug. And so we can't, I don't care how good the stock market does. I don't care how much better the economy gets. That's not a trade-off that we can make. We can't say, well, you know what? He's doing a good job in that area. So we're just going to allow this to be swept under the rug. We can't. We cannot. If this would bring the system down, well, if we're that entangled, then I guess it needs to come down. But and I don't know how we affect that from the states. Well, I don't know. Something just popped in my head. I mean, I know there were some people on that list from Tennessee, for instance. So Bob Corker was listed on there. Now, I'm not claiming Bob Corker is a pedo. I'm not claiming that. I'm not claiming he did anything wrong. But, if nothing else, these are all out there. Our state, if they see anybody's name from our state and it's in an email that, is suspicious or incriminating or potentially incriminating, they should investigate. Every state should do that. All those people live in a state somewhere. And so I don't know that I have confidence that the federal government is going to do anything about this. But once again, all these people live in states. Now, some of these states are not likely to do anything, but you know what? Here in Tennessee, if there's anybody on that list from the state of Tennessee, we need to be looking hard at it. And, hey, if there's nothing there, fine, there's nothing there. But we can't let this kind of stuff, we can't just close the door on this. We can't let this die with Epstein. We got to figure out what is what. Bondi can't be trusted, in my opinion. I mean, Bondi was one of Trump's worst appointments. Absolutely one of his worst appointments. As for the system, she says the system would bring the system down. Well, the only approved system for governing is the Constitution. Why not try that since we haven't actually followed it for like decades? So just something to keep in mind. Matter of fact, we talked about that a little bit earlier today on the show when I had Donnie Kennedy on. And like I said, that one, we had some technical issues, but it should be posted in a couple hours. I'll tell you what, guys, we have to get back to the Constitution. And states have to start stepping up. They have to. Especially think about it. What if we lose the midterms, it's going to be chaos. You're going to need states with backbone. You're going to need states with good governors and good legislators that will do the right thing. And so you need to think about that. That's why our governor's race is so important. That's why we don't need a swamp creature. That's why we don't need a weak man. That's why we need somebody like Monty Fritz, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm biased. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to watch our program tonight. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe. So please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And we do appreciate your support. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, teeninformer.com. Find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. All right, some announcements for you. Just to remind you, some of the websites to go to for information on legislation: tncss.weebly.com, Tennessee Firearms Association, freeyourchildren.com. I forgot to mention earlier, that's Tiffany Boyd's group, Free Your Children Homeschool. But I'm going to tell you what, that lady knows a whole lot more than just the homeschool issues. Tennessee Stands and Tennessee Eagle Forum are other great sites. Remember, tomorrow is Maha Day on the Hill, February 17th, 9 a.m., Cordell Hall Building, 425 John Lewis Way. Now, this Wednesday at 7 p.m., we'll do a special tribute to H.K. Egerton, also known as the Black Confederate. If you knew about H.K., tune in to honor him. If you didn't know, tune in to learn about all of his efforts to tell the truth about the South and the Civil War. Join us next Monday, regular time, 7 p.m. This will be February 23rd. Our guest will be John Llewellyn. He's a Republican candidate for Tennessee House District 78. He's going to tell us why he's running and what kind of reception he's getting out there on the campaign trail. At 8:30 p.m., the president of THEA, which is the Tennessee Homeschool Education Association, will talk about his organization and upcoming legislation impacting homeschoolers and their parents. So you don't want to miss that either. Please take time to check out our other shows brought to you by West Tennessee TV by going to westtntv.com or myparistv.com. And you can get the links to the Mike Weatherford Show, which he'll be on tomorrow night, 7 p.m., and the Sportscast with Jeremy Bucklow on Sundays at 4 p.m. Thank you for tuning in. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.